Hi, everyone. I'm here with my fellow doctor, Dr. Toby Larson, who is a fabulous leadership coach. We were introduced to each other by a good friend of ours who lives here in Silicon Valley. Toby used to live in Silicon Valley, so he's got some experience in the tech world, as do I. And right now, what we're going to talk about your journey, Toby, of getting to the leadership coaching position that you're in, working with the executives that you do right now. But you have quite the story, quite the journey, and we've talked in the past about it, and I think it's a story worth sharing. So start from the beginning. Tell us a little bit about yourself, Toby, and tell us how you got to be the leadership coach that you are.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Tram. Thank you for having me on and doing this podcast together. I My undergrad is in mathematics education, and I moved out to the Bay Area in the late '90s, essentially during the dot-com boom. And at that time, it made more sense to go into software consulting as opposed to education, basically because rents are high in the Bay Area. And even in the '90s, they were super high even then. So having a job that could support both food and rent was critical. And tech was a great place to do that. Coming with a math degree pretty much gave me the qualifications I needed to get in right away as a software consultant. And so the majority of my work was working as a business consultant, really learning what the business processes were of our client companies so that then I, as the implementation engineer, could modify our software to better match and align with their business processes, as well as helping them to identify and adopt new best practices for their businesses based upon the inclusion of our software in their system, in their corporate ecology. And so we were mainly working on, first I worked with a common computing environment with EDS for Hitachi Data Systems. And I was in charge of asset tracking for over, I think it was about 10,000 laptops. We had a software package that we were implementing as our base image for all the laptops. And there are all sorts of crazy technical issues because we didn't have as much ability to do things with computers back in '97 that we do now. I wanted to work for a startup because I saw what was happening in the startup world. So I left EDS to go work for this company called Allegis. We made channel sales software. And that's where I got to work with companies like Samsung, Compaq, HP, some of the bigger
The
hitters.
bigger, yeah. Don't we
And
know it here in the Bay Area? Yep.
absolutely. And I got to work with the VPs and SVPs of those companies to really, once again, understand their business processes and help them improve those through our software package. Unfortunately, our software package was not in high demand, and it was really difficult to get user adoption within these companies. And by 2002, we were starting to enter into a assumption of debt, and so I got to experience a layoff. And
You
I
say that with a smile on your face. I've not met anyone who has a smile on their face when they talk about layoffs the way you are. So, yeah, tell me more about that layoff experience.
For me, it was an important part in where I am now. It allowed me to, it gave me a break to step back and reconsider what I was doing, what I wanted to do in life as a vocation. I had offers to go to other tech companies, but at that point, having been doing 80-hour weeks for a company that ultimately laid me off, I didn't feel like that was the environment I wanted to jump back into. And I had a math degree with a teaching credential, so I did have a backup career to jump into. And I really enjoyed working with people more than I enjoyed working with code. And so I wanted to make my job more about working with people. So jumping into education was an easy step to take. Also living in the Bay Area in California, being willing to go into education gave me a leg up on finding work. So that was,
Wow, what were you feeling during that time trying to balance? Okay, you are living in the Bay Area, not the cheapest place to live in the world, right? But then going from engineering and tech into education, I mean, what was going on through your head and your
yeah, so a few things. One was I I was excited because it meant I had more time to surf and ride my bike. So that was the plus that fortunately I latched on to right away. At that time, we didn't have career counselors assigned to us or any sort of real support. But my company did give me a 3 month severance. And so I did have some money to basically have time to make a next step.
That helped kind of cushion knowing your runway, because that's what we talk about in one of the videos. One of my videos is that knowing your financial runway, so that actually appeases that anxiety that you have at a layoff.
Absolutely, it did. And then surfing became a really great sport because talk about low cost. You can hang out at the beach all day for free. That is one of the few places in California that you can spend your day spending money. So I started looking into education jobs just to see what was out there, and I realized as a math teacher, I was in high demand again, and so that felt good. A huge decrease of salary though. The difference between you know senior consultant to classroom teacher, first year classroom teacher, was my pay dropped to a third of what it was. And that was significant, required some lifestyle changes. I was also able to make lifestyle changes I wanted to make though. The startup life does hurt you physically. It does attack your health, attacks your well-being, with the goal that you hit your exit and are able to address those. And so sometimes our exit is a giant payday and other times it's a layoff, is kind of how I look at it. But both are better than just suffering through hoping for someday with no real direction. And so yeah, so that I was hurt though at first. I mean, at first when I got that layoff, I definitely felt like, why me? Am I am I not good? Is there something fundamentally flawed with me? There were other people who were not laid off. There was a colleague who had already committed to going to UCLA for his MBA and had put in a 2 month notice with the company. I got laid off, not him, even though we were in the same job functions. Granted, he left to go to UCLA and did not get a 3 month severance because they knew he was leaving. So I think that was part of the calculus that went on there.
In your head, you were probably doing some kind of comparison. I know it's not good to compare, but
Absolutely. I was actually driving back from a meeting with Samsung, and I got a call from the VP of engineering asking if I was coming into the office today. And I was like, you should know I was on a client side all day. And he goes, oh, come in and see me when you get in. And I called up one of my friends that was a colleague and said, "Hey, has there been layoffs?" And he said, "Yeah." And I said, "I think this is our goodbye." And he goes, "Damn!" And that driving up 101 and knowing I was coming in to get terminated that was rough.
yeah.
For sure. When I was given the news, I was angry. I didn't burn any bridges, but I sure had a torch they had a can full of gasoline that I was like avidly wanting to use in my mind. But I realized like this is business and these people are making hard decisions. And so even though it hurts and I'm angry, don't be vengeful about this. Don't be spiteful.
Any practical tips to get just in between that anger and calm, that phase right there, especially given that you're at Aspen Wellness and being the coaching side of you to come out? What kind of tips do you have for that?
Yeah, I would say if you got the layoff notice today, when you get it, tell whoever's laying you off, just respectfully tell them, like, this is a really hard message for me to receive. And so thank you for being forthright. I'd like to wrap up here as quick as possible and have some time for myself. I think most employers will understand that. This is a hard decision for them to make as well. Realize that. Realize that they see themselves as having failed when they have to go from hiring to laying off. That is not something executives want to do. That is a sign of failure in their minds broadly. I've heard numerous executives talk about that publicly and privately. So realize it's a tough decision and ask for that space, and then go to your car or wherever it is, find some space to be alone, and go ahead and let it out. Scream, be angry, you know, let let yourself feel that cathartic release, And then once you've let that go, and that should, you know, that might take an hour, might take half an hour, but once you've let it go, once you've kind of worn out that energy, then start thinking about the accomplishments you have made. Think about the relationships you've made in that company. Think about who you want to stay connected to. Realize that they'll want to stay connected to you as well. And really start to inventory what you do have. I worked in MMA. That was the layoff ultimately ended up with me being the corner in the UFC for a fighter who I had started working with in his pro debut. And we had just put in 5 years of effort, which is about what it takes to make it from 0-0 record into the UFC. You know, I ended up there. So I think one of the things I knew is I knew I had a lot of capability, and I knew that there were other adventures I was going to get to go on, and that this was a change. I wouldn't even look at it as a temporary setback. I would just say this is a change. This is a milestone. And sometimes milestones cause you to tell you that you need to go a different direction. And that's fine. You're not going to figure out that direction in rage. You're going to figure out that direction when you see yourself as the highly capable, being that you are.
I thank you so much for giving the executive's point of view. Knowing if I was a person who was laid off, knowing that the person who delivers the message feel that hit and feel that pain too. And so it's not just like I'm the victim. So you mentioned taking inventory, and it may not take half an hour. For some people, how they're feeling it, it might take several weeks to get to that point where you can inventory your network, your past colleagues, inventory your own achievements. That might take a while, right? And
Yeah.
allowing themselves to have that initial emotional state. And then you fast forwarded to look at how life can change and how exciting it can be to you just said, I think you just said MMA and UFC. You and I had talked about this, and that's a totally different track. So how did you even get there, just in the short amount of time that we've got left? How did you even get there?
Yeah. So after working in tech, I used my teaching degree. I finally used my undergraduate degree for what it was intended for. I fell in love with coaching sports. I coached football, golf, and track, and absolutely loved coaching. I enjoyed teaching math. I would have loved teaching math had the kids approached math the way they did sports. Especially algebra 1 is not everybody's favorite subject. And so that's why I loved coaching a little bit more. But it was really the growth. It was helping people grow, helping people develop a future self, an idea of a future self, and grow into that future self. That was just, to me, that was just that felt like purpose in life. I felt just super aligned with doing that work. It was unbeknownst to me, it was the first touch. It was my first venture into self actualization, I guess. And I got a little taste of it there, and I I wanted to make that more and more of my career because I realized this is who I want to become. And so I went back and got my master's in kinesiology to study sports psychology and skill acquisition. During that time, one of my high school athletes had become a professional fighter. And he was just getting ready for his pro debut when I happened to bump into him at the grocery store. And we started working then. And that translated into me getting to basically be at American Kickboxing Academy on a daily basis as a mental performance coach, working with quite a few professional MMA fighters. And I I wanted to work with the up and comers because I wanted to create my own champions. And I
That's a tagline. That's your tagline right there. I want to create my own champion. That's a great tagline.
well, that was the thing I loved about AK. That the phrase at AK was "We build champions," and absolutely, I was there to be part of that effort. Yeah, I help create champions. That is something I absolutely love doing. And I so far the closest I've gotten, we've gotten a few regional belts. Athletes I directly work with have won those, and then I've gotten a couple people into the UFC, which is really akin to getting a high school football player into the NFL. It's a long process and a lot has to go right and a lot of work has to be done. You have to get to that skill level in order to be able to be viewed as an elite and to be given the opportunity to compete with the elite.
Oh my
And
goodness. We have so much to unpack in that. We'll have to save that for the next episode of all the different leadership skills that you can gain through all the different coaching experiences that you've had. But what I take away from this is the blessing in disguise of the layoff. Because if that didn't happen, your life wouldn't pivot. You wouldn't have taken that step back to really take inventory of your skills and your achievements and your love of, well, surfing. Yes, but also of coaching and teaching high school. Thank you so much, Toby, for being here. Thank you for sharing your journey. My goodness. And optimism. Don't worry about the career journey. It's supposed to be where it's supposed to be. And taking that in stride. Thank you so much for those tips and for those lessons and your story about the layoffs, that it's really not the end of the world.
it's hard. I mean, it really is hard and it's scary. And financially, it is, you have a set number of bills that you can pay. I get that. That feeling is real, but optimism is your way through.